The church is harboring this dirty little secret of their recreational use of pornography. Because leaders and church attendees may not realize that every click, every view with every watch is fueling an industry creating the demand for paid-for sex with children, and with prostitutes, and with slaves. How does porn do all of that? How is it not this clean, contained little private activity that takes place on a computer? Because it normalizes exploitation. Evil power dynamics, where now control must be executed over someone else. It's no longer interesting just making love to someone. You have to control them. You can see this is a Luciferian slippery slope.
Welcome to the War Room. I'm Kyle. Thank you so much for joining me once again on the Word at War. The enemies and powers of darkness continue to wage a nonstop spiritual war against us on multiple fronts and multiple levels. This is especially true when it comes to the most innocent among us, children. Abuse, neglect, and sexual exploitation are all wicked tactics employed by the enemy to fracture and destroy the minds of God's most precious creations. Joining me to talk about this today, and most importantly, what we can do to fight against this, is my friend Joe Horn. Joe is the CEO and host of Skywatch TV, best-selling author, renowned speaker, and award-winning film producer, known for works like Time Bomb, Unlocking Eden, and his upcoming book, and what we're going to be discussing today, Innocence Shattered, which exposes these dark realities, challenges the church to awaken from passivity, and calls readers to action. Joe, thanks for joining me, brother.
Hey, Kyle. First, thanks for having me on the program, but also for being brave enough to host this conversation. It's not a popular conversation.
Yeah, I found this out a few times too, man.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Yeah, a lot of algorithms don't like it. You got to be careful what you post to social media. I mean, most of the trailers want to get zapped or taken down. It's tough to get it out there without feeling like you have to censor or kind of curt what you're saying in terms of the language you choose. So, no, I appreciate it. And you've already told me we can remove the mittens and let our claws out for this one.
Indeed, we can.
Yeah,
that's one of the things, just transparently, Joe and I prayed before we got started, that we are not going to hold back today. We're not going to temper our language. We're not going to worry about the algorithm, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I feel like we serve a God that's bigger than any of the enemy's algorithm or whatever, he wants to do to try to suppress the language. So, or suppress the information. So we're going to pull that Band-Aid off. We're going to shine the light in all the dark corners. I think I prayed that as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, just a little bit of a warning for everybody that's going to listen to this. It is not going to be fun, sunshine, roses, teddy bears, and puppy dogs. It's a dark topic. It's a really spiritually draining topic, but a very important one, because I think that more than anything, the enemy loves to attack all of us, but he knows, because unfortunately he's smart and has thousands, if not longer, years of knowledge on how to wage spiritual warfare against us. He knows that if he can destroy children and destroy their minds and get to us when we're young, he can poison the roots of the tree. And so we're going to talk about his tactics today and what we are seeing as a result of those and what we can do to fight against that. So, for starters, just to kind of dive in a little bit and rewind, I know this is, a huge passion area for you. Mm-hmm. You and I have gotten to know each other pretty well over the last year. And there's a couple things on your heart that are big key areas of passion for you, but this is probably the number one if I had to pick.
Yeah.
And what for you was the turning point there, and what happened to you, kind of coming along that really just God pulled your heart in this direction?
So first, let me rewind to something you said, and then I'll give you your answer.
Sure.
I just want viewers out there to know, yes, this is a very difficult conversation, but there's a lot of hope and beauty in talking about the solution. So buckle up for sure, but also just know that in this interview, we can also get into some of the wonderful things that God is already doing in the lives of the children that we're serving now as a family and as a ministry.
Amen.
At a place called Whispering Ponies Ranch, where we offer rehabilitation and intervention for the kids that have been pulled out of sex trafficking and some really dark, nightmarish situations. So just, again, buckle up, but just know that we've got some really beautiful things to also highlight and unpack. So
Absolutely.
it's not all just completely draining. To answer your question, I was like so many people that I now identify are like I once was, Kyle. I was your standard guy involved in ministry. I'm doing my thing. I'm answering my call. I believe myself to be being altruistic in my day-to-day. I'm a father of, at the time, 2, and I specify the father of just the 2 because I'm gonna reveal something about the timeline in which God converted me into, or maybe a better way of saying it is I began to be obedient to what was an underlying calling as He began to clarify details about what my journey was supposed to shift towards. But I, growing up, thought I was going to be a Christian blues musician. I put in gazillions of hours. I wanted to be like a Christian Stevie Ray Vaughan or a Buddy Guy or a Gary Moore. If for those that follow the blues, you know exactly what I mean. And I wasn't just paying lip service to that. I was really working very hard. I put many projects together. I'd played as the lead player for C.C. James, who got to meet Derek Trucks and people with Clapton's team, and opened at the Waterfront Blues Festival in big blues towns like Portland, Oregon, right ahead of B.B. King and some of the legends, and toured for a year with some of the guys from the old Steve Miller Band, and, was really peripherally working.
Yeah.
This idea to kind of elevate myself as a blues musician, and was doing it kind of under the guise as ministry, but was trying to, I'm just going to say it now. I don't think I would have said this at the age of 20, 21, 2, 3, 24, which is when this is really hitting a peak, which sadly, and I hate to admit my age, to date myself, this is like 20 years ago now, Kyle.
When I started, more, but I won't hold you to it.
Yeah, I could be closer to 25 years if we're.
We won't worry about that.
But back then, I had started in my early teens. I mean, I'm a ravenous guitar player. I'm working the chops. I'm trying to, mimic every great player on VHS tape and pause the video and rewind like Stevie Ray Vaughan and learn every chop I could. And so there was a lot of devotion. I wasn't just paying lip service to it. I was trying really hard. My Christian model was going to be that I'm going to go out where real people are. I'm going to go to the clubs. I'm going to go to the bars. I'm going to go where real people are, and I'm going to be a light to them, to those that would never darken the door of a church. That's what I used to say. While that was sincerely my strategy, I learned very quickly that mostly what was happening is that the opportunities to evangelize or do meaningful gospel work were nearly prohibited. The places that you're in are not conducive at all to a one-on-one devotional after, half of the room is, intoxicated and they're all wanting to just dance to your blues music. So I'm playing in secular blues projects. I'm trying to be an ambassador for Christ. I'm very young. And by the way, for context, I'm very jaded by the church. I'm very jaded by the church, and that's one of the reasons why I don't want to resemble the church. So I go back to my early 20s, and I'm thinking to myself, I want to get out there in the world and do something meaningful for God. My intentions were correct, but without life experience, I have no idea how to make that manifest in meaningful ways. Mostly what's happening is just 1 a.m., exhausted, carrying amps to not conferences, concerts and festivals and things like that.
Yeah. The next gig.
And I come home. Now my wife and we've got this little baby named Kate, who is at the time like 1 and 2 years old. And I get burned out of the road and living out of a suitcase really quick.
Yep.
So I go through a season of life where now I'm just doing businesses that I own, and I'm making income, and I'm kind of in between ministerial efforts. In the early 20-teens, my parents start founding 2 things. One, a place called Skywatch Television, and another place called Whispering Ponies Ranch. And at the time, this was not a master plan to make the TV show work in tandem with this other charitable ministry called Whispering Ponies Ranch. They were both just acts of obedience. My mom, primarily the visionary for how horses might have some therapeutic benefit to children. She doesn't yet know what those children are going to be up to at the time that this thing launches. She doesn't know where they're going to be coming from. She doesn't know what ministries we're going to partner with. Meanwhile, my dad, being obedient in his calling as an author, had gotten kind of tired of other ministerial platforms rejecting his book premises. It's too hot for TV, they said, or it's too obscure, or the mainstream church wouldn't accept, you out here trying to walk us through looking through a biblical lens to comprehend or understand the arrival of aliens. Like, you're looking at, you got to realize this is in the late 90s for context. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah, completely.
Today you can go online and there's, any number of your own hand-picked, cherry-picked selections on learning about a Nephilim or a UFO through the lens of the Bible. But some of that is because of pioneers like my father, Dr.
That's
Thomas Horn, and people like L.A. Marzulli and Steve Quayle and Russ Dizdar and Mike Heiser that came along and said, it's okay for the church to have these conversations. But going back to the 90s, there's no place for a Tom Horn. So he's kind of exhausted in that he wants his message to be received, and the only people that'll talk to him are people like Art Bell. Massive programs that see him almost as an opportunity to put a crazy preacher on the radio for call-ins and shock value responses and stuff.
Yep.
And he's still doing it. He's like, I don't care. I'll talk to these people and I will share the love of Christ, and they can answer, they can ask me all their questions. And I, as a surrogate and an ambassador of the Lord, will do the best I can to talk to the world about these things, because the church has no interest. So in a way, I'm also telling you the origin stories of Defender Publishing.
Yes, you are.
Which you and I have talked, and you know this. My dad ends up founding Defender Publishing because he's tired of books being rejected that he feels are timely, and the world is beginning to ask questions. He was so far ahead of his time. He would say the world is going to start asking the following questions, and usually within less than a decade, the world would be playing catch up and they'd be asking the questions that his books showed up many years ahead of time to answer. And so my dad never considered himself a prophet. He never called himself a prophet, but he had a prophetic mind, his instincts, his discernment. He could read a room and go, I'm pretty sure the world is going to gain a curiosity about this or that. And he would show up ahead of time with a book that kind of flushed it out biblically. And he would always take on the things that, again, the conventional entertainment-based church had no interest in. And he noticed that a lot of people would start to respond to those works and those radio broadcasts. It costed him, by the way, a lot in the conventional denominations that he was serving. It costed him a lot of fanfare in the conventional entertainment-based church circles. The presbytery that he once held lots of clout with in the denomination that he served were seeing him as nuts. And he just didn't care at all, Kyle. He went the way of fully embracing his cult.
He did what God put on his heart.
He did. So he's now founding in the late 90s and early 2000 teens, both Defender Publishing and then Skywatch Television, as a response to wanting to be able to publish books that he felt like God wanted him to write. And there's a bunch of other stuff. If you really want nuggets that I have never talked about, Kyle, that are exclusive to your audience, I will also tell you that the first two books that he wrote through another publisher, and I won't name names, you can go do your own research, but they ended up not paying him a substantial amount of royalties. It would have been enough to pay off a mortgage in royalties based on the popularity of his books. They were using his books to underwrite the expenses of other departments, other employees, and we would later learn they were hemorrhaging cash and were using his books to try to buy time, and they eventually went out of business. So, from every angle, my dad, from not being compensated for what it was that he had put out from a business standpoint, from a ministerial standpoint, being exhausted with other people telling him no, he just got to where he was motivated, let's just say that, to start a TV program in a publishing house. Okay. I am now in roughly 2012, 2013, 2014. I'm still kind of coming out of the music scene, and now I'm just a father, and now I have got 2 children. And my parents start founding this place called Whispering Ponies Ranch, where they have every intention of working with and ministering to children that have been pulled out of sex trafficking, wards of the state, the foster care. And God had used this season of 25 years ago, when I'm in my young 20s, working at a place called Camp Davidson with an organization called Royal Family Kids, who did this ministry as kind of a seed that we never forgot about. So here we are 25 years later, and we've never forgotten the impact of seeing Jesus Christ show up in a camping program for kids that have special needs, that are wards of the state. And, Child Services has had to intervene and pull these kids out of abuse and stuff like this. What God can do when he shows up, the Holy Spirit, what he can do when therapeutic programs fail, man-made therapeutic programs fail. And so there's this convergence of events, if you really want the origin story behind where I went from kind of hiding from my true calling to then fully embracing the inevitable. And here it is. It is now roughly 2013, and Opal Singleton, who's a child advocate, she's an expert in grooming, she's written books, she goes around the country and she talks to people about what it looks like when children are becoming groomed, what the process is, how these hookers end up in forced prostitution when society judges them for, a lack of positive life decisions. And then you find out a lot of these young girls and boys are victims of a circumstance they never would have signed up for. And society's like, well, they're getting what they get. What a sleaze. Why don't you go to a homeless shelter? We're very, very, very cynical, very judgmental, very hateful even to the ugly parts of society, which, of course, as you read in Matthew, is completely the part of society that Christ instructs us to prioritize, not overlook.
Yeah, what you do to the least of these is how I will judge you.
The orphans and the widows. We make it about fog machine riddled rock concerts at our church. We make it about programs that titillate and entertain the adults. We've moved away as a society from programs that prioritize children. We're in the Bible Belt of Missouri, and a ton of the churches have no focus on kids at all. Most churches have done away with programs like Royal Rangers, like I grew up, which for those unfamiliar is like a Christian version of the Boy Scouts. You learn how to build campfires and survive and memorize scripture verse and save money.
I was in Awana.
Awanas,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very similar. Awanas, I understand, does boys and girls.
Yep.
Yeah, but they're teaching you life skills and how to be productive. And the Assemblies of God, when I grew up, had a program called Missionettes. This was kind of like Girl Scouts for Christian girls. They learn penmanship and how to sew and how to clean and how to cook and, be productive. So most churches have no interest at all in these programs anymore. And we're going to get into society and the shift, and we can get into some politics, we can get into all that. But to finish up my origin story, it's 2013, and Opal Singleton comes on Skywatch television, and it just grips my heart, man. And I am kind of, at this time, you got to realize I have a professional dog training business, and I've told you this. And people are like, wait, hang on, time. A lot of people don't know that I'm also a board certified holistic health practitioner. Like, wait, pick an identity, man. What are you? A blues guitarist, a health practitioner?
Yes.
Also did martial arts for decades. Anything I could do with my hands, I would go like ADHD, OCD, all the way to an 11, and go all in, whatever it is, as long as I could, A, I wanted to learn it, and B, I could do it with my hands. I like to, dog training, it's movements, it's body language, it's reading a room, it's understanding the underlying root cause of where the dog's anxiety is coming from. It's trying to fix the human problem in the house that's contributing to the dog problem. Funny enough, most of dog training is working with the people, but we're not talking about that today. This is where my head is. I'm a dog trainer. It's a very successful business. It is 1,000,000% draining all of my time, and it's becoming a giant area of passion. And so I've got this duality of both my own personal ambitions. I want to be a dog trainer. I produced a DVD. You can go to Amazon right now and see this much heavier version of Joe Horn as a dog trainer. There's a DVD on Amazon right now called The Natural Dog Training Method. My brain is not, I'm going to host Skywatch TV, I'm going to be the CEO of this, or run Defender Publishing. My brain is literally conditioning my father to get ready for the fact I'm leaving the ministry. People think it was always just built in. I'm my father's son. My dad is seeing a protege. He's gonna raise me up to take over the kingdoms.
Yes, I have molded you, son, for the last time.
No, none of this is happening.
Prepare for the takeover someday.
Yes, someday the mantle will be yours.
No.
There was literally none of this is happening.
No, yeah.
My dad fully understands that I've got my own businesses and I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And my passions aren't with Skywatch TV. This is back in 2014 where they're starting their first inaugural year. My dad's doing this thing. I even encouraged him, just for fun, before he started Skywatch TV not to do it. The very thing that I am now the CEO of, I told him, Dad, don't do this thing. It makes no sense. He couldn't shake the feeling that God was calling him to start this ministry, even though what was ironic was he knew that he wasn't going to be with it for all of time. He was looking at his own mortality and his age. And so, like, none of us. And so I said, Dad, you're going to end up with this ministry that's so big. You're going to have people, ringing your cell phone off the hook day and night. You're going to have 50 employees. And I said this. I said, you're going to be in a retired Walmart building somewhere with books wall to wall, and you're laughing because you've seen the warehouse, Kyle. And other than the fact that it wasn't a retired Walmart, it was a retired grocery store that became the Defender Publishing, dispatch warehouse where they're doing all their own fulfillment and distribution. Anyway, everything I said came true, by the way.
The moral of the story is be careful what you speak because someday you will own it.
No, that's right. I've often said everything I said ended up being kind of prophetic, even though I'm not a prophet at all. But there was one key twist. It wasn't my dad's cell phone that was ringing off the hook. It ended up being mine.
Mm-hmm.
By the time Skywatch was really getting its legs and becoming what it is today, which by the grace of God, this is not me flexing at all. This is me giving him credit for absolutely every blessing that ministry receives through the support of people that watch that program. That ministry is in 200 million homes worldwide now, with the recent signing of a contract for the Word Network.
Yeah.
I mean, what God started just barely over a decade ago has blown up into, it's an opportunity that we can get into in a minute. I will parse my stories out at least into chronological order.
Before the next part of our discussion, if you guys are enjoying this show, check the description to get your copy of the book, Innocence Shattered, and support Joe today. Also, if you want to help support me, I would really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, follow, and share if you feel I'm deserving of it and you listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever that is. Please make sure that you leave me a 5-star review. Also, if you'd like to be part of a healthy, supportive, non-algorithmically controlled community of believers, I'd love for you to join my school community. Check the description for the link to join today. Your dad never got to meet him. Obviously, it just didn't work that way. And since I've backed into all this space, it's been I've learned about him kind of through you in reverse, which is not the normal path for people. But I will say this, the man is after my own heart in the fact that he believed in the concept of no risk it, no biscuit, Joe.
Oh, Kyle. No risk it, no biscuit is a funny little anecdotal way to frame it. But if you unpack what that means to you and I, as we've talked about, that analogy is profound.
It is.
It is. Sometimes you need to read a room and know when to fold them.
You do.
Hold them or play them. And my dad had this impeccable anointing to be able to kind of measure out risk and kind of imagine mitigating that risk if things don't go well, putting his cards on the table, and then God would just nourish and bless and elevate. And one of the reasons why I believe that is my dad was always very humble, and he always gave God credit for everything. You couldn't tell him how incredible he was without him kind of parrying or dodging, or he got uncomfortable if people wanted books signed and Tom, I can't believe I'm getting to meet you. He was like, okay. Anyway. It's the early 20 teens. I am training dogs. I have a meeting with my father and I say, Dad, I love you. I can't do both. My passions are with this dog. I've got this DVD that was doing really well. It really was. Back then, people weren't so much running to YouTube even just a decade ago for dog training. The DVD still had a very viable marketplace. And I was meeting people. I was meeting people in the pet sphere. My stuff was being featured in magazines. you could see God blessing that. You could see that the money was there, that the joy was there, and it was working. And then I thought, for sure, God had answered my prayer about which one of these directions to choose between the responsibility of helping my father manage and maintain Skywatch TV, because that was my involvement there. I was doing some of the editing. I was his warehouse manager. They called me the chief of operations, or COO, chief over operations. And I was managing staff and stuff. This is what I'm saying. Like, my brain was there to help my father, but it was dreaming this completely other direction. And my friend Darren Pappas, who had been known for like 20 years in the Branson, Missouri area as the dog guy. He was called the Branson dog guy. He had posters up in pet stores, the Branson dog guy, Darren Pappas. I, through a series of coordinated moments that I believe to be God, ended up connecting with him. We made friends very quickly. I studied under him and learned a lot more about dog training. He opened my eyes to things. And he says, Joe, I'm moving to California and I'm giving you my black Rolodex. I'm basically handing my business to you. 20 years of clientele. Very successful people with multiple dogs that have money that just want the best. And I said, Darren, I'm not you, man. I can't. You're the guy. I was only in it for a couple of years and thought, oh my goodness, I'm not ready for this. But he said, no, man, trust me, you've got it. And out here, and he looked at the landscape. He's like, you're the guy. I mean, right now, you're going to be the guy. So he gives me this black Rolodex of all of his names, and I start getting calls out the wazoo, Kyle. And I take this as confirmation that I'm on the right track and that I am meant to now go to my father and say, it's time for us to part ways ministerially. You're always going to be my dad. I love you. I'll do what I can peripherally, but I'm doing this dog training thing. And I'll never forget, and I have never told this story ever. So here's another total Word at War exclusive. My dad sits back in his chair and he looks up at the calendar and he looks at his, he used to keep Post-it notes all over the monitor of his computer. He was very old school that way. He didn't like technology. And he said, son, we can do that. And we looked at the next 8 weeks and he said, I'm not sure over the next 8 weeks with the way that the schedule is that we can afford to let you step out right this instant. But let's look at the fall and then I'll do everything I can. You got to help me replace what you're doing down there. He was going to help me be released so that I could go do my thing. Now, again, let's loop back to Opal Singleton. During this whole, convergence of events, Opal Singleton, the child advocate, comes on Skywatch TV and she's talking about how young children are groomed and how they're forced into prostitution. And that is in my heart now. And I am having this wrestling match with God. He is really starting to challenge my direction as a dog trainer. I mean, on paper, it looked good. Oh my goodness. But internally, I started to really second guess my calling. And I will tell you, I was completely invested in the dog training thing, and I was hoping that I was wrong. I was kind of hoping to be relieved with the sweet release to go back to dog training with no concerns at all that maybe this other thing was a calling. Like, Lord, let that just be something I ate last night, maybe lack of sleep. Maybe I'm called to pray for the kids.
Yeah, right.
But this is not my calling. I'm almost telling God, but that's not my God, you made me a musician, and I've got this skill with dogs. And what was all that with Darren and meeting and the timing? And, come on, like, not looking for a sign. And it still pops up this wave after wave after wave of what looks like evidence I'm on the right track. And then I'm visiting Easter Sunday some of my dear friends, Stan and Lynn Williams' church. And what do they have? Lo and behold, it's a child advocate from overseas. And I'm not going to be specific about this because he said one of his difficulties was trying to raise money for his ministry without using the internet because he doesn't want the cartels looking for where he's at to know what he's up to and where he is. But he said, we're here because we need to raise money. And we're over in this country pulling kids out of forced prostitution. And it's very expensive and it's very dangerous. And we have to, armaments and the guys that are walking around. He said, we literally have a facility that most people would view as a prison. It's not to keep kids in, it's to keep the bad guys out. Concrete walls. men walking around watching the grounds. They're armed with M16s and stuff. I'm like, well, okay. And by the way, I recently went back and looked his ministry up. The last time they posted was about 4 years ago. And I don't know if that's because they're not a ministry anymore. I suspect it's because the risk of posting in American social media was just not worth doing. So I don't know where they're at today, but I remember God used that again to slug me completely in the stomach. I'm hearing about the atrocities that these kids are dealing with, their shame cycles, how they control them mentally, how they use substances to control lest protest, to keep them docile and subdued, and how young they expire. How many years these young people are expected to be able to endure what's happening to them before they're dead. It's a very short lifespan. And again, it's like a mule is kicking me in the soul.
Yeah, God's not letting you get off the hook that easy.
No, because the Opal Singleton and then this was very close proxy. It's like maybe a month. Lord, thank you for sending them. I'm so grateful that you're sending surrogates. This just can't be my calling. I mean, surely you gave me my musical instruments. Surely you provided my dog training business and my connections there. Sure, you're rationalizing.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, and a couple of weeks later, back at the Skywatch studio, I kind of survived some of my feelings, and I'm getting back into the mindset that I'm on the right track with dog training, and Tom Dunn mails me a DVD called Detestable. It's a brutal watch. I was only able to make it through about 3 minutes. So, Tom, I love you. I never watched your movie. But the fact that I had no threshold, I could barely survive the trailer. There's a man weeping in the trailer, and he's describing what he's learned as he's looked into the eyes of these children that have survived the occult. And I'm like, nope, la, 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 I'm not doing this, man. Not doing this. And Lord, I'm so thankful that you're using Tom. Here we are again. And it was like the Lord interrupted that prayer, and he said, for all of your whining, you're not doing anything for the victims of abuse. And I couldn't believe I was getting ready to say this. But in my spirit, something began to shift. And later that day, I went home, Kyle, and I said to my wife, I said, baby, you're not going to believe this. But you know how I've been building my dog training enterprise, and you know how I'm getting money and how it's working, and the fact that I'd kind of surrendered some of the music in order to do that. You remember all that? Yeah, okay. She knew the answer. Like, she didn't know what, but she knew I'd given up on it. Like, something had shifted. She's just waiting for me to tell her what it was. And I said, I don't know what this means yet, but I think God is saying I am meant to stay at Skywatch and not only not leave, but crank up my emotional investment, crank up my responsibility, not leave my parents to go pursue these other businesses. I said, there's a lot of me that doesn't want this at all. I was hoping that I would believe this wasn't my calling, but as I'm wrestling with God, I'm starting to see it more as a need to surrender what I want and to just be obedient to what he's asking me to do. And I said, there's this child advocate angle. I don't really know how this flushes out. I said this at the time because it wasn't that long after that I started, because of my now desire to want to help with children. God opened up this door with a man named Yaku Buyans to become friends with Yaku. And he's a staunch child advocate and an expert in how these trafficking rings work and what the church is failing to do and all of that. He's been on TED Talks. He's everywhere. His name is not spelled the way you would hear it pronounced. It's JACOBOOYENS. People think his name is Jaco, but it's Yaku Buyans. His sister was trafficked by her record label in South Africa for many, many years as a small child, up until, I believe, the age of 13. Don't quote me on that. But she was very young when she finally fought with her handler. I mean, fought. Drag out, drop dead, bite, kick, scream, punch, wail. And by the grace of God at this hotel was able to escape the room where she was, and there just happened to be a Christian cop that was on the floor that scared this handler off. And so she had enough time to find her way out of it, and then of course later reunited with her family. But the point is, that's what motivated Yaku to become a child advocate, is because he didn't see his sister for years as she was missing as a person that was being handled by her record label in South Africa. So this is very personal to him. Well, he comes to Skywatch TV to talk about his movie that, by the way, you can watch right now on Netflix, unless you've canceled your Netflix like we've done. You can also find it on DVD or elsewhere, a movie called 8 Days. I also believe it's on Amazon Prime. 8 Days. And it's a story based on true life events having to do with sex trafficking. So he's really out there in places like Hollywood trying to raise awareness for this. Well, he comes to Skywatch TV because now I'm kind of warming up. I know that I'm supposed to be a child advocate. I'm going to stay with Skywatch Television. I've talked with my dad about it having something to do with children. And we've talked about how Whispering Ponies Ranch might play into that somehow.
Yeah, you've got the pieces and the components to all this, but you're still not sure how everything's going to fit together.
It's a great example, is like taking a puzzle and kind of shaking it out on the table, and you start to put the first few together. You know you've got them, but you don't know how they're going to arrange yet. Yeah. And they're still building Whispering Ponies Ranch. We didn't start our inaugural year until, I believe from memory, don't quote me on this, 2017. You know, it's been 6-7 years now of ministry every year there. So don't quote me on that. But I want, because COVID always throws me. We lost 1 year because of COVID, and then we lost 1 year because of an insurance debacle. So my brain, I got to go back and actually fact check myself on what year exactly. Because again, I'm coming out of the dog training and I'm helping administrate Skywatch TV. But this place that my parents are building now, I'm not super involved there. But the intention is for it to be a place of rehabilitation for children that are pulled out of sex trafficking and the foster care system, et cetera. Okay. So I've given God my yes. I've rededicated my intentions to whatever it is that he wants to do with my life. I've expressed this to my wife. And now for now, I'm just at Skywatch TV producing television shows, building trailers for Defender books, helping my dad negotiate network time slots. What I don't realize is that I'm in life college training for what it's going to look like when I don't have my father anymore. And somebody from literally the carpet to the ceiling fixtures needs to know how to arrange those moving parts. And Kyle, I will tell you, there's nobody that could just come down here today and jump in as CEO to one of these businesses or ministries without a lot of time.
Yeah.
Probably, honestly, no exaggeration, probably a year minimum just to know where all of the things under the hood of the car are placed.
Mm-hmm.
It's complex. There's lots of bits and parts. And a lot of it seems very simple on the surface until you understand below that, below that, below that, below that, way back, way back, way back. And then you realize, okay, infrastructurally, small decisions could be catastrophic in the long run. So there's a reason why things exist the way they do. And I can just tell you that because I've had others come along through the last several years at Skywatch Television and make suggestions. And I can just tell that the way they're coming into it, that it would take way too long to explain why that would probably bankrupt the model of the ministry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
You're very best. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, one of the things that you and I've talked about just in our friendship over the last year is, not understanding the complexities just of running a nonprofit. It's an extremely delicate and complex mixture of things that you need to be very careful, especially when you're in ministry, because, the enemy is just waiting for an opportunity to pounce at your throat and rip it out like a lion, right?
Yeah.
To make you die. So it's a very delicate balance of things. So I definitely know, in talking to you, I've learned a lot just through that time.
No, and I hope that, if there's anything I can offer you as you continue to rise in media. I mean, I'm so impressed with your show. Of course, we're getting off track here, if there ever was a track, and I don't want to leave your audience
No,
like
you're
in
fine,
the
man.
middle of this limbo called the answer to the question, what made me become a child advocate? But this will be the only official record I've ever done the longer version of anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Is right here. It's because I'm not pressed for time, and you've told me that we can just relax and get into and unpack this stuff. So for those that would ever be curious, that were fans of my father or have followed Skywatch TV, they've never heard this origin story. So I've told my dad, you probably shouldn't start Skywatch. I've tried to start my businesses. It's working. And now I'm all the way back and I'm committed, but I don't really know where all of the pieces are going yet. Yaku Booyans comes to do his movie 8 Days. This is roughly 2014, 2015 now. And I said to my wife at the time, I said, I'm not a qualified child advocate. And what I love about that admission is because I meant it with all of my heart. I still look at other people that are doing things and I say, I'm not a qualified child advocate. And what I've found is that a lot of the people doing this feel the same way. And it's because of the size and scope of the dilemma, the number of missing children from foster care every year with no chain of custody, the number of kids that are being abused in every unimaginable way now in the United States. We can get into all this in a little bit. But it's so big that no matter what you offer, if you're objective, you'll stand back at the end of the day and you'll say, technically on paper, I'm not a qualified child advocate. But God is asking for you to do what you can do. And there is joy in finding the part of it that you can do, to know that what you're doing matters in the lives of children.
I don't think it's by happenstance at all that we have so many examples throughout Scripture of people who have felt the exact same way as you. We have Moses doesn't want to do, and, yeah, right.
I'm not qualified. I'm not articulate enough.
Gideon. I mean, the list is literally just about endless of that. And I think that is not by happenstance, but for very deliberate encouragement for those of us that get into this. Because I think one of the tactics too of the enemy for anyone that gets in the ministry, you're going to come under attack. And the more successful you are, the more attack you're going to encounter. And one of the main things I think the enemy loves to do is to make us think that we're alone and we're not good enough. So everything you're saying just rings so true to what we see in biblical example.
I love the way that you buttressed what I said with that, because I wasn't thinking that way. I wasn't thinking I was an example of a Noah or anyone else. Yeah. I'm thinking, Noah standing on the rooftop screaming that there's going to be rain and people laughing at him. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he felt alone. I'm sure he felt like his constituents viewed him as nuts.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I deal with, it's like that. I have to open every conversation with, how far do you want to go down what a lot of the secularized world would consider Looney Tune, tinfoil hat type stuff? Missing kids from foster care, surely the government, and then they assign some reality to the government that they're already failing in or isn't possible if you actually dig. And you listen to their own words, the FBI. Because of HIPAA laws and privacy laws, a lot of times even when children die in custody within foster care, those records are almost impossible to glean or gather or archive or explore. Many of these kids are classified as runaway. And of course, now we're getting into the foster care dilemma, which we haven't really opened up yet. We can get to that in a minute. But just so that if anybody is curious how this moment came to be, it was not a one-off. It wasn't a sudden prayer and then I was fixed and bing, my heart goes from I'm a dog trainer to a child advocate and I know what I'm going to do. It was a series of a good couple of years, and I had to start by saying, God, I'm giving you my yes, and I don't know what that looks like. And it meant to me, Kyle, that I was walking away from what looked like financial stability. It looked like a permanent walking away from something that was so awesome and so my lane. I loved going into homes where dogs are on the brink of being euthanized. We're talking about food-aggressive Great Danes that weigh 180 pounds, and they have a bite history, or the owners are concerned they're going to bite someone because they've snapped or something to this effect. And I go into the home knowing there's risk, but I can't explain to you. This would have been like somebody else's version of jumping out of an airplane to find their parachute. There was something in me that felt engaged and present in the moment. And I absolutely adore dogs. I love children and I love family construct. And so for me, I hated people are in duress. Dogs are in duress. Dogs are going to be destroyed that are perfectly salvageable. You're just talking the wrong language. Dog is doing this behavior because of XYZ. And as soon as you understand where it's coming from, let me come and take a look. I had a lot of success. That was kind of my thing, is a lot of it wasn't, I got bored with sit, stay, down, obedience. Here's a treat in exchange for you laying down for me. The ones that I thought are on the brink of euthanizing To me, I felt like I was going in special ops, like a rescue mission. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I'm telling you, there was a personal passion. But I now have said, God, I don't feel called to do that right now. I feel called to prioritize these other things. So I had a tremendous passion for what I was doing as a dog trainer. But again, I felt like it was something God wanted me to surrender, you know, and the fact that I loved it meant that at the time felt more like a sacrifice to me, made it more genuine, because now I know that I'm doing something I feel God has caught. You ever felt that?
Oh,
It's
yes, very much.
because you're giving up something that you want so much that you take that as information. It almost illuminates even in more grander ways that you're stepping away from something you desire. It must be that God is not letting you go on this thing that he wants obedience from. At least that's how it felt to me. And I frame it that way because I don't want to be guilty of, yeah, I made this, saying on radio, I made this big sacrifice unto the Lord, and aren't I the arbiter of everything righteous and bigger than my feelings? So at the time, I'm saying it felt like I was making a sacrifice. I can tell you, when you do that, if you're obedient long enough, you start to see that what God was really doing to answer your prayer in the first place, when you say, God, use my life, he's going to bring that back around. And I find enormously, indescribably, irrefutably more value in what I'm doing now in ministry than I did back then, even though at the time I thought this was my life. I mean, this is who I was built to be. Now I look back and I think a lot of that was genuine at the moment. I felt that way, but it's so tiny. And I'm not minimizing, dog intervention at all. I really am not. But when I think about the children that I now get to work with, wouldn't trade going back to build a dog training enterprise for 1 second. I'd be missing out on the grandest opportunities I've ever seen.
Yeah.
To do things that I actually care about. Does that make sense?
Before the next part of our discussion, if you guys are enjoying this show, check the description to get your copy of the book, Innocence Shattered, and support Joe today. Also, if you want to help support me, I would really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, follow, and share if you feel I'm deserving of it and you listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever that is. Please make sure that you leave me a 5-star review. Also, if you'd like to be part of a healthy, supportive, non-algorithmically controlled community of believers, I'd love for you to join my school community. Check the description for the link to join today. Absolutely. And like I said, it's all worthy. It's all noble. And there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's all God's creation.
Right.
And God cares for all of God's creation.
That's
one
right.
of the beautiful things we can see in the story of Jonah, even if you look at the very end, the last thing God says is, I don't want to have to destroy these people, no matter how wicked they are. There's however many people, that are in this city that don't know their right hand from their left, which more than likely he was probably talking about children. But then the last thing he says is including all, and even what about all the animals? He doesn't want to destroy any of that, but ultimately it wasn't animals that Jesus pulled to his side and said, those of you who lead any of these little ones astray, it would be better for you to be stillborn or have a millstone tied around your neck and thrown into the depths of the sea than lead one of these little ones astray. And so there's just a higher calling there than it is with an animal.
Well, and my daughter, she may work with both. She's a child advocate, but she's also the animal special encounters coordinator at Whispering Ponies Ranch.
Yep.
And I would never disparage somebody if they're watching this and they're out there at the coastal lines pulling birds out of oil spillage or cat rescue. I agree with you. God has given us dominion over all of his species, and he wants for us to take care. I'm talking about personal callings. And by the way, I would say the same thing if you're not involved in any of what we've talked about and you're the janitor of a church or a school teacher. As long as you're placed where God has given you his commission to be there, you're doing for the kingdom exactly what you need to do. So this is not me disparaging you or saying, if you work at a clinic that helps medicinally support animals that are on the brink of death, that somehow that's not as noble as what Joe Horn does as a child advocate. What I'm saying is Joe Horn was walking in something that he wanted. God had a different calling for me. That's the key.
Amen.
So this is not my lane versus your lane, your specific brand of ministry versus mine. But I'm so thankful that I made the sacrifice and laid down my company, because now I'm doing things that I care infinitely more about. Also, you can't tell what the future is going to hold. My father passed away in 2023. And if I had been, let's say, out dog training, I sincerely don't know now who is here to have stepped into a lot of that.
Yeah.
And it has been the hardest thing that I have ever had to do. Kyle, you've been my friend now for about a year. We've talked like old friends. I've told you things that only my mother knows, only my wife knows, about how difficult this current season is, in having stepped in for my father on lots of fronts, from spiritual to financial to just the pressures of being responsible for all the moving parts. I would say it has been a brutal season for the last couple of years. I would also say that every time I think we're about to get counted out as a ministry or something's about to implode, God shows up and rescues it in ways that I can't. This is not my business acumen. This is not Joe Horn learned a ton under his father and somehow salvaged the model because he knows a bunch of stuff. My dad, when he was in the ICU during the last 11 days of his life, was saying things like, now I always disputed this, but he would say, Joe, I think the world has changed. I don't have the answers. It's going to be you. I think he knew that he may not go home. And I just kept saying, Dad, don't worry about business right now. Don't worry about ministry. Let's get you home. We'll get you straightened up. We'll get you supplements. We'll take care of you. And he never came home. But he was saying, even in the ICU, the world has changed. I don't know if the old model works anymore. The old model being a dynastic TV program where you offer a book for a donation. Much of that doesn't work the way that it worked at all, even just 3 years ago. And so, people want content. And if you provide for them what they can tangibly sink their teeth into is ministerial work, and they believe that you are an extension of what they care about. So taking the gospel to the four corners of the world is a huge priority for Skywatch TV. If people align with that vision, they're praying for you. They're supporting you financially. They are buying into your ministry. And so, we have moved a lot away from, and again, I've not talked about this publicly at all. Somebody from Skywatch would have to hear me talk to you, Kyle, to even know that this has guided a lot of our thinking over the last year. We've moved a lot away from, if you make a donation, you get this 3-book package, and it is becoming more, if you want to support the ministry, you know how to do that. Here's a website, but let's just focus on the interview. Let's get the content to edify Christ. Let's get lives converted. We're living in the last days. The enemy knows that his time is short. Let's go on the offense and preach, and not be so focused on the offer. And if people are watching Skywatch, they're seeing that, whether they're taking a cognitive mental note of it or not. And none of that is designed to disparage the way that our previous generations did ministry. It used to be that people really wanted your book package, and so they would support your ministry that way. And then because you're getting support, you're able to then turn. My father gave away so much resource to the children. And I am not going to be specific about that because it was his personal business. But I watched my father many, many times take what would be blessings from above in the form of one of his books performing really well, and he would turn around and just underwrite ministry with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So anyway, I know this isn't Joe Horn's stream of consciousness, like oral history of the family construct for the last decade.
Dude.
It's kind of become that. But you asked what made me a child advocate, and it wasn't a simple question to answer.
Yeah.
No, it was a process over time. When I started saying yes to God, and now I'm the CEO of Skywatch TV, even prior to my father's passing, I got super interested, super engaged, and it started to make a lot more sense why I had stuck around and went all in, shoulder to the plow, because there was this convergence of organic support from people that watch Skywatch TV that want to know what's going on at Whispering Ponies Ranch, and they want to sew into that, and they want to know. We want to see B-roll. We want to see video. We want the updates on what happened to the little kids this year. So now Skywatch TV does a pre-summer campaign where we're raising money to send kids to camp for this program. And then we do a fall, post-summer, kind of a post-mortem where we tell you, here's exactly what flushed out this year. And so it's a huge focus of our ministry. It's the most fulfilling thing that I do. We produced a 6-part television series, if you want to pivot now into what causes this massive crisis. Because again, foster care is a side effect of a spiritual problem that the church in part is guilty for aiding and abetting. You see, Kyle, the church is harboring a dark little secret in this country, and it's called porn addiction. We got to take a minute to unpack this. If you want to know what's causing all of this damage, if you want to point at things less generic than just fatherlessness and motherlessness when you're looking at an entire generation of children that are under complete assault, to brainwash them, to make them second-guess every God-given construct that used to be healthy-mindedness or being raised with values, to appreciate your fellow human even if they disagree with you. Just a basic sense of moral obligation to respect the fact that others may differ from you in the way that they look, the color of their skin, without trending towards the elimination of people that oppose you because they're the opposers and you're the oppressed and they're here to eradicate your way of life. If you want to look at layers and layers and layers as you peel back the curtain on this thing, yes, you can generically blame all kinds of things. Alcohol, for the father that batters his children. But one of the things that I believe occupies, it definitely occupies probably one of the most gravitous things that you could blame for this that gets the least amount of discussion. Let's just put it that way. To me, it's the elephant in the room, and that's the porn industry. Many sociopaths, many murderers, many rapists, people living on in jail cells, living out life sentences, most of them would admit that at some point they share a commonality, and that is porn addiction. Because it was the first place in life where they started saying, yes, anything I can daydream, that's where I'm going to take my imagination. The problem with that is we were created to be submissive to a creator. And we are never going to be satisfied until we find out why God put us here, and then we fervently, at our own sacrifice, serve that end. There might be moments where you feel gratification for the thing that happened under your watch while God gave you stewardship over something. You may be proud of something that happened that you can see the good in while you were on that journey. But most of the effective ones, Kyle, you know this, it comes with hardship, it comes with challenge, it comes with financial uncertainty. Sometimes there are medical prognoses that interrupt your temporal feelings of joy or titillation. There's challenges, man. Sometimes it's hard to do the right thing, to take care of a family, to walk in faith when you don't know for sure what tomorrow's going to bring. And so when you say, yes, I'm going to emotionally and mentally entertain anything in the world that I daydream, and there's no bumper rails, there's no boundaries, there's no rules, I'm just going to satisfy my flesh in anything that it wants, most of these people would tell you that pornography was one of the most effective catalysts in conditioning their mind into that cycle, looking for self-gratification, appease the flesh at the cost of anything or anyone else. You start to objectify human beings and then reduce them to nothing more than playthings. These are not people's daughters. These are not people's mothers or sisters or human beings. These are things that only exist to bring me pleasure.
Yeah, there's
you
no
see what
soul.
I'm saying?
There's no soul. There's no spirit.
Soul.
Yeah, it's just an entity for me to do whatever I need to do with. The complete dehumanization.
That's right. And I use this often because people get it really quickly. That old saying, if you give a mouse a cookie, he wants a glass of milk. There's no moment where you give a mouse a cookie and he doesn't come back immediately for something else. You've just trained him that there's going to be more. He's very unhappy if you cut off the gravy train. He's going to move somewhere else and find it somewhere else. Anytime you say yes to the flesh, and then like Ephraim, you push the conviction of the Holy Spirit away, or even indulge in these industries in ignorance, your brain is still under the same kind of neurologically induced hit that many drug addicts experience. It's progressive. What made me excited yesterday is utterly bored today. And now there's a progression. A totally normal heterosexual male finds it erotic to watch beautiful women enacting on camera what appears to be consensual, we'll just call it lovemaking. After 2 or 3 months of that, bored out of his mind. His spouse, bored out of his mind. And I'm not going to articulate the varying ways that people end up enacting this out, but I can tell you at the bottom of this thing, it's progressive, it's dangerous, peeping Toms turn into rapists. Eventually, when people have tried to titillate and satisfy this inner sinful man flesh, this meat suit that we're stuck in, when they find that there is no possible way to satiate that with what they can simply watch on a screen, they now have to act something out. This becomes abuse. This becomes tormenting loved ones. This might be that a child in the home in proxy, or a neighbor's kid, or someone down the street is a young woman or a young boy. They're going to find a way to enact this out. This is why child abuse is at an all-time high right now, even though we're having a revival in this country. This is why I say it's a dichotomous situation where you see good rising and you see evil fighting to maintain control at the same time. Satan has not given up at all. This battle is not over at all. Revival has only just begun. We need to be very focused in now what our offense is going after. There's no way to satiate the flesh. It is progressive, it is dangerous, and the thought that you would ever achieve satisfaction through watching pornography or enacting out any daydream that you can possibly construct is to only be a part of becoming a monster.
Yeah.
And I've had people push back on it. Well, no, people use porn for years. What are you talking about? I said, no, not when you see the side effects of where this go. I think it makes people better at masking who they're becoming. And why do you think that is? When every time, well, we had no idea. The newspaper breaks, or little Tommy was touched by a neighbor. Most of the time, the narratives, we never saw it coming. Not that guy. He did cookies for the church fundraiser. What are you talking about? He was the school driver, the bus driver. What are you talking? He was a pastor. What are you talking about? So why is this becoming the church's problem? We're going to get into that right now. The church is harboring this dirty little secret because of their recreational use of pornography, because leaders and church attendees may not realize that with every click, with every view, with every watch, they have no idea how that is fueling an industry that is creating the demand for paid-for sex with children and with prostitutes and with slaves. How does porn do all of that? How is it not this clean, contained little private activity that takes place on a computer? Because it normalizes exploitation. It's that slippery slope we just described. Evil power dynamics, where now control must be executed over someone else. It's no longer interesting just making love to someone. You have to control them. Pretty soon, Kyle, even though you've said let's be uncensored, it goes to dark places too sinister to even unpack in a program like this, where the screams of suffering become the only way that some of these people can find a momentary and fleeting moment of erotic.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does, unfortunately. I mean, anybody that's looked into this topic in the least little bit, because it's a dark thing, especially, you've made a very clear connection, which nobody can argue, I don't think, between pornography abuse and the dehumanization that comes with, psychosis and these things that a serial killer or a murderer would eventually get involved with. And ultimately, you have other things too that pattern-wise start to happen. The experimentation on animals, the murdering of animals, and this.
Right.
Ultimately, it's the dehumanization occurs in the mind, and it's almost like you become dehuman yourself in the process of dehumanizing other people.
That's
and
right.
It's like you swing the door open wider and wider and wider for Satan to have more and more of a foothold in there and drive out all the light and only leave darkness.
And we could get into AI. What you just said is completely correct. I will, for the sake of being thorough, because people are going to say, well, what about AI? AI is only making this problem much worse. Now, as horrible as everything I've just said is, and I am not advocating for the porn industry with this statement, but I will say this. For the most part, because of our laws, consensual lovemaking on video has been pretty much the standard bearer for what people can get their hands on. We're not talking snuff films. We're not talking dark web, dark market. We're talking lawful consumption of this entertainment. Where AI is going, and I promise you they're going to try to normalize this and make it legal, and they'll use every amendment in the Constitution to do this, to argue for freedom of speech, freedom to consume whatever one would like to satiate themselves with. And it'll get very blurry because now it's not a real child that's being abused. It's an AI avatar that was developed for the purposes of abuse, in the same way that they're already making this argument with, dolls. Let's take people that have a bent towards pedophilia and let's partner them with dolls so that they can act out all of their darkest desires, because at least it's not real children. And in that way, they're working through their problems and they're keeping this contained. I think it's practice for when the real thing is going to happen. That's all I think.
The dehumanization isn't going to change. You're still feeding them. You're still feeding the monster, and the monster, it's a drug. It's like any other drug. And the more you consume, the more you need to consume to achieve the same high. And ultimately, you get to a point where there is no more high. The only high left is to literally dehumanize another being, another entity, another person, whatever the case would be.
Do you see how Luciferian that is at the core, though?
Yeah, 100%.
God wants to build and heal and raise and restore. Mm-hmm. Lucifer wants to dismantle and destroy and literally, blood and death. And it's the fact that a person's desires become in line with that thinking. You can see this is a Luciferian slippery slope. So a minute ago, I said I'm not going to advocate for the porn industry, and I said that there have been some bumper rails in the sense that mostly what people have had access to is, I don't even want to say consenting adults, because there's a part of this where you have no idea when you're consuming this content who you're actually watching. In fact, I make the case in Innocence Shattered. There's a large number of people that have been forced into prostitution that you think are a consenting adult that's there because they want the limelight and the Hollywood glizz of being a porn star, and they're literally being forced into rape on camera. So when I say consenting adults, I'm giving this huge benefit of the doubt treatment that I don't even personally subscribe to. But even if that was your argument, that the porn industry is consenting adults lovemaking on film because it's a career they've chosen. Imagine now, and I don't want to give people ideas, but imagine now with the rise of AI, how dark markets and black markets are always ahead of what is already available. You can see just on social media platforms now funny videos where they've swapped out Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on top of Annie, and he's singing, maybe something from the Sound of Music. Sound of Music, yes. Funny, comedy videos where it looks like Sylvester Stallone and they've put his face on somebody else's body, and it's hilarious, it's funny. The problem is the technology. Those are drag and drop goofy programs that are available for people to download and play with. Imagine how much further the technology already is and how it's being used now to create avatars specifically and expressly for the purposes of abusing them. You know this as a guy that's savvy to software. When people develop a video game, for example, if people don't know, there are these things called private servers. Some giant corporation like Activision comes out with a game, and then people that have smarts enough to do this figure out how to download the program files based on the disk or the download. Then they write new amendments to that software and change the rules of the video game, drag and drop people's faces, change the voices. Mm-hmm. Instead of a field goal, maybe it's you go over the field goal and you float away in a hot air balloon. They make funny little gimmick things, and they change the games, and then they offer them free on private servers from places like China or Russia, where people can play the experience that looks just like the one that has the LLC copyright, but it's a complete hybrid version of the game. So you know that these softwares are already being used by malevolent people, and you know that they're lifting the bumper rails between what used to only be possible on camera that involve real consenting or at least real human beings. Now, when the imagination and a person's ability to fantasize anything they've ever desired can be visually architected in just moments. Imagine what that's going to do to rocket fuel someone's desire to go further and further and further. There are no more bumper rails. There are no more restrictions to just what human beings can do with pain thresholds. There is only now imagination running a spree. And what that's going to do to continue that slippery slope of dehumanizing other human beings until you're not just practicing with a doll, you're enacting out what practice has readied you for, which is the actual rape of another human being or the murder of another human being. So now, why does the church have anything to do with this? In 2020, Barna Research came out with several staggering statistics that not only blew my mind, became a part of what I felt God was telling me, you have to warn the church. This must be a warning. I feel like God is going to hold those that are not ignorant to this accountable in a way that he has not for others. We are held to a higher standard as self-proclaimed leaders of the church. Other people's lives depend on us not opening portals into making sure that our churches are sanctified and purified by the blood of Christ, and to have oiled the doorknobs and to cast out spirits and make a place safe for the Holy Spirit to come in and move amongst the people and stir and interrupt and take control over the service. When you are ignorantly, even by ignorance, clicking on video that directly fuels the paid-for demand for sex with children, whether you knew that's what you were doing or not, by raising this ravenous appetite that is completely unsatiable, you need to know that God is taking inventory of who is on that team. This is something I feel God put on me to share, especially with the leaders of the church. So, Kyle, if leaders of the church were secretly involved in porn, how bad would it be? And I remember I asked you this a year ago. How bad would it be? I'm going to skip the ruse. We're not going to do the ruse because I've gone really long on some of this, and we're going to go straight to the reveal. Barna Research reveals that 57% in the United States of our senior pastors admit to have been involved in porn regularly at some point, if not currently. 64% of the youth pastors. So it gets much worse when you get into the youth pastors. And think about that. Think about that.
Wow.
You want your 12-year-old daughter under the leader of maybe a late 20s to early 30-year-old man who is telling you that God has commissioned him to be there and he's the steward of the youth in that church? 64% of our youth pastors have admitted to regular pornography use, either currently or in the past. And if you were thinking just now, well, Joe, okay, but that opens a big caveat. In the past could mean anyone that has struggled with this. What does it look like today? The average is about 20% total minimum. 20% total minimum. So 1 to 2 out of every 10 pastors. And you got to realize that these polls that they do, when they're putting together these case studies and they're participating with people, many of them on screens or using their cell phones to answer these questions, there are several, and I outline this in the book Innocence Shatter, there are several reasons why a person might, even during the midst of a poll, amend their answer. A personal conviction, or they decide that suddenly Big Brother is watching. People are paranoid and they have no idea how technology works. They think somebody's going to leak the fact that they were a part of a poll, so they back out. Some people will fudge their answers and kind of soften the reality of what's going on because of the ministry-ending shame associated with saying, hey, I'm a pastor and I'm a porn addict. So there's lots of ways that people kind of dial back their answers even in the middle of a poll. Less than 1% of the same pastors that admitted to being currently porn addicts even recommend telling their church. Less than 1%.
Yeah. The thing that I remember the first time that when we talked about this, that immediately came to me, and there's something else that came to me this time when we're having this discussion, but the first time was admitted. That there's going to be a difference. Obviously, the real number is going to be higher, because anytime we're admitting, then there's going to be some that are not, and probably much higher, which is terrifying considering we just identified that almost 60% of our senior leadership in the church is at least engaged in this in the past of some kind. But the other thing that we've clearly stated multiple times now is that this is not just use. This is addiction. Addiction and use are very different. because addiction is something that you are going to really struggle with getting away from, whereas use, maybe not so much. So I think that that is also a very telling word that you can pluck out of the numbers that you just shared, which is terrifying. And if we've gone down all the way down to 10 or 20% out of that group, I would find that very shocking, especially when it seems like the vast majority of them don't feel like they can turn to people inside of the church for help, the very people who they need to turn to in addition to God for help to get out of this pit that they've fallen further down into.
Yeah. Well, and another part of staggering information from the same research that was put out is of that percentile of pastors that admit to currently still pastoring, but continuing their pornography consumption, only 8%, Kyle, of those believe they should even be transparent with their congregation. And less than 10% of church attendees even say that their church offer programs, to your point, that offer rehabilitation or prayer or support or men's groups or anything to the effect. That's why I say it's a dirty little secret. It's men and women. They do not want to talk about this. They, if they're not using, don't want to be around those that are. They view them as creepy and weird, and the ones that are don't want to share a brohood of other users because they're supposed to be bigger than that, or they're the leader of communion, or God has commissioned me to gather the money every week and put it in the till, or perhaps my role is I'm the face of this particular outreach. Nobody wants to lose their status in the church. So you have an enormous number of leaders in Western civilization who have admitted this, and then of those, almost nobody wants to talk about it. Of those, almost no one has a place to talk about it. And less than 8% of them even want to be accountable for it or deal with it in terms of letting their congregation know that they're currently struggling. And they'll even admit in the same research that they continue to feel shame cycles, but continue pastoring. So look, if you're out there today and by some miracle you're still listening to Joe Horn over an hour and a half, and his stream of consciousness and his childhood growing up under Tom Horn and all of that. And if you're one of those leaders in particular that has taken stewardship over the body of Christ, you're the pastor of a church, here's what I want. People want to know, Joe, what do you offer in terms of hope? You've done a great job battering people, beating them up. Everybody's depressed. Everybody's sad. What can you offer in terms of therapy? What I would say is, I'm not a licensed counselor. I am not a therapist. That specializes in this. But what I would offer is this. If you click on something on your computer or wherever it is you're viewing this garbage, I want you to picture a sea of 1,000 innocent faces looking at you through the screen, locked in dog cages, screaming, please stop fueling the industry that is responsible for the fact that there's a demand that I be in a dog cage for later abuse. Now, if that sounds self-righteous and really cruel, I want that not to be the focus here. I don't mean to hurt people's feelings or further demoralize them or batter them. What I'm trying to do, Kyle, is I'm trying to shake a very asleep church awake to the reality that this is not a benign little sin that you can indulge in the secrecy of your home while you and God slowly over years and years sort out whether you're going to go through a month of maybe victory and then a month of failure. Every single time you click on things, you're fueling an algorithm that, again, and I've said it 3 times, is creating the demand for paid-for sex with children.
Yeah.
I don't know how you unhear that once you understand the gravity of what you're supporting. I don't care if you buy chat rooms with people one-on-one. I don't care if you subscribe or pay a monthly subscription fee. Every click goes towards trending the popularity of that content. That creates the demand for people to create and deliver more of that content. What are they looking for? They're looking for people that they can do these videos on. Now, why do foster kids play into this? I said earlier, the foster care system is a side effect of a spiritual problem. And by the way, I should lead with, the foster care system isn't even the largest aggregator of where these abused kids are. Remember that lots and lots of kids that are being abused, the vast majority of them are still in homes where the abuse is either not discovered or the states don't have enough evidence to intervene, or they're not motivated, or they're already overburdened and don't have placements available and literally can't remove the kids from what has been reported abuse. So when I say to you, Kyle, today in the United States, we have 420,000 children living in foster care right now. Remember that that's a very small percentage of kids that are still being abused in homes where they've never been pulled out of. Is that not just... Now, follow me for just a minute. Of the 420,000 children that are actively living in foster care, you have 90% of them statistically guaranteed to experience 2 to 5 forms of abuse. This can be physical abuse, holding their hands on stovetops as a form of discipline, locking them in dog cages, beating them with bicycle chains. This could be forced touch, forced kiss, forced sexual acts that we don't need to unpack with specificity. 2 to 5 forms of abuse. 50% of the children placed in foster care will never be reunited with loved ones ever again. They will never see siblings. So imagine little Sally is in a home where she's living out a literal nightmare and has to hide under the bed from the real-life monsters that live in the room next door, hoping for all that she's worth that the stepdad or the brother or the mother doesn't come home or passes out from overdose. And maybe, just maybe that one night, they're salvaged from some kind of physical or mental or sexual abuse. And the only constant she's ever known is that under the bed with her is her little brother, Billy. And I'm just pulling these names out.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Child Services is aware of the abuse. They remove the children from the home. They're thrusted into foster care, but because placements are difficult, Sally never sees little Billy ever again. This is what I mean when I say it's a level of mental trauma that a lot of adult men would bust under leaving war times. They come home and they need therapy.
Yeah.
Many of them take their own lives and have not seen the kind of abuse that some of these tiny brains that have not even had a chance to even process what they've been through are trying to process what they've been through. 80% of these young men, from the ones that survive, the ones that don't come up missing, will become incarcerated. Almost all of the men and women will become completely financially destitute. The women turning to things like prostitution, forced labor as a way to eat. Many of them will join gangs for protection in exchange for a place to stay and something to eat. The young men will be turned into enforcers and drug runners. 70% of the young women will become pregnant almost right away with children that are destined for where? Statistically guaranteed to be pushed right back into foster care. And so you can see this cycle goes on and on and on and on. And so am I blaming the foster care system? No, I'm telling you that they're overburdened, they're underfunded, and a lot of really bad people have figured out there are lots and lots of blind spots. And it is a smorgasbord place for these people, these malevolent, evil people, to go and exploit these blind spots. It's a conveyor belt of victim after victim after victim after victim. And so that's why I say, man, we are not going to fix this via voting levers. We're not going to fix this via law enforcement putting pressure on our police. There is one solution to this very spiritual problem, and that is a massive awakening inside the church, Kyle. And I am praying that that is what we're seeing the very beginning of.
Same here.
In what is going on right now with church attendance up, with people that questioned everything, including their own gender, are now giving their lives to the Lord and are rebuking that path. I am for the first time in many, many years, somewhat optimistic about the direction of the organic church, not the entertainment-based church, but the organic church. And I'm not writing the entertainment-based church off. I really am not. I'd love to see revival there. I'd love to see the Spirit of God get a hold of these giant ministries that have the funding and say, Lord, we're sorry for what we've focused on over the last 20 years. We're going to recommit our direction to the things of you. We have a TV infrastructure. We have a money infrastructure.
The resources would be incredible.
Can you imagine having your heart, Kyle, and a $10 million budget, what you could do with that? I mean, think about, right?
I would have, honestly, I have, my wife and I have these conversations all the time, because that is, you want to experience true joy on earth. When you give and you have the ability to use your resources to make a difference in people's lives and protect even one of these kids from something like that, you will never experience anything more rewarding on earth. Unfortunately, we all run after the shiny toy a lot of times in our minds, right? The first thought is, if I won the lottery, I'm going to go get a Lambo. And it's like, no, man, if I won the lottery, the first thing I'm going to do is look around and see where I can go help people and make people's lives better. And that's the true, you want to be in touch with Jesus's heart and with God's heart. That's where you're going to be the most in touch with it.
I agree completely. And I've even, not to ever say that I make a routine out of second guessing God, but I've pondered carefully and respectfully without second guessing his moves or counter moves, and I'm sure you know where I'm going. You probably know what I'm going to say. When you look at people that have been blessed beyond comprehension, you see the size of their buildings, and you know enough about ministry to know this is costing a fortune to run this place. And you're like, God, I'm not jealous. I'm not saying what you've done for us isn't enough. So that's not the message here.
Yeah.
But how is it that these superficial, or sometimes even evil or dishonest, how many times have headlines busted over the last just couple of years, Kyle, where some very well-known author or some very well-known ministerial figure is now caught up in a scandal involving an underage child?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And you're like, the resources, how can you get into a headspace? I'm serious. So I said, Lord, how do you get into a headspace where you've been blessed that much and would take for granted for 5 seconds the blessing, to know that God can just shut the spigots off? You can just overnight be dismantled and finished. Why not keep your goals altruistic? Why not be focused on ministry? And then you've seen like your ministry model, Skywatch TV. You know that it has not been easy for us at times. We are fighting tooth and nail to keep some of those ministries afloat. It has taken every bit of gas in the tank to come up with ideas and creative incentives and to try to keep, messaging the vision and to work very hard. And I wonder sometimes if God doesn't, at some point in the journey, Kyle, and I'm not saying that every financially blessed ministry is nefarious. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if somewhere along the way, money and power are some of the most corruptible things, and God is saving you from that grappling match.
Yeah.
He's going to keep you dependent on your knees. He's going to keep you relying on him to keep it in the black, because he knows things about you that you would never guess about yourself. If I'm being completely honest, I have no bent towards money. You know me personally. We've talked a million times, and you know that I am a hermit who would literally never be on a podcast ever again or do TV ever again, which blows people away because they're like, wait, you seem so comfortable with it. I am responsible for ministries, and I care about the vision of those ministries.
The only vice you have is high-end carpet, Joe. We both know this.
High-end carpet? Okay, see, he's been in my house and he knows there's no carpet in my house.
I'm bringing some levity to a heavy discussion right now.
The whole house is concrete floors, and I wanted it that way.
I know.
I was super blessed. My wife and I got to build our own home about 5 years ago, and I said, and it's, we're still paying on the mortgage, but I said, all I want is no carpet, no vinyl, no wood. I am tired of tile. I am sick of every floor. I got big mastiffs. I got big dogs. I'm tired of the mess and the thing.
Yeah.
I said, I just want concrete floors. And I said, you can do what you want with the blueprint. You can paint it blue. You can do whatever you want. So that was our deal. And she got to tailor make all the rooms and the layout and the colors and the things. And I got my concrete floors.
Yep.
But I don't know if that resonates, man. Like you're asking God, Lord, would you do something incredible to bring a surplus to this ministry so that we're not constantly looking at, 60-day cycles of,
Yeah.
how are we going to keep doing this? And, and I don't know, I'm being more open in this show than I am ever open, on TV.
Before the next part of our discussion, if you guys are enjoying this show, check the description to get your copy of the book, Innocence Shattered, and support Joe today. Also, if you want to help support me, I would really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, follow, and share if you feel I'm deserving of it and you listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever that is. Please make sure that you leave me a 5-star review. Also, if you'd like to be part of a healthy, supportive, non-algorithmically controlled community of believers, I'd love for you to join my school community. Check the description for the link to join today. Yeah, no, that's the importance of it. I think, people are getting to see real you and your heart. There was a comment when you heard me, I was kind of typing in response to a comment earlier.
Yeah.
And I was answering someone who was in the audience of the show, because if you're a member, you can be in the audience of the show.
Right.
While we record. And I was answering that person. And that's what I said. I said, I'm so glad you got to be here to see my conversation with my friend and see his true heart. Because you have an amazing heart. Your family has an amazing heart. Your team there, your mom. I got to spend some time with your sweet mom, and she has an amazing heart. And the things and we got to stay at the ranch, and the things that are happening there, and what that is just an amazing, amazing thing. But yeah, at the end of the day, from the resource perspective, it sure would be nice to have more resources.
Well,
no doubt about it. But I'm the same as you. I evaluate myself, and I know the pits that I could potentially fall into. And as tough as it is, if my prayer would be, Lord, if you don't think that I'm ready for that, then don't give it to me.
Mm.
And that's hard because, you look around and you there's a lot of need here. I can obviously recognize walking away from a job where I was making a very good living. But I just, made the decision that I'm not going to support the exploitation of children, because that's exactly what my former employer was advocating for.
No, I know.
Was the targeting of children,
right.
the satanic targeting of children. And I wasn't going to take a paycheck from that, nor was I going to help, the company earn money, because if I'm there, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then, you turn over to ministry. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a far more rewarding path to choose than that, right? And we all have to do it, right? When we look at some of these celebrities, it almost just feels like, whether knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or not, it's almost, you just feel like they've made a secret pact with the devil to get what they have, and he pays well.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because my next thought was going to be, maybe it isn't that just God is blessing these people beyond what they would ever need in 20 lifetimes, because they're not using a lot of it for his kingdom. And I've actually wondered that if real ministry that changes and moves things isn't almost always kind of the model that we're experiencing. Not to disparage anyone else, but Skywatch has to eat what we kill. I mean, the old analogy, we got to eat what we kill.
Yeah.
It's an old hunter's reference. You're not going to be able to store up 6 deer for the winter. You're going to live day to day eating what you kill that day. And, Skywatch television finally started this year to trend away from diabolical battles with, I shouldn't say diabolical battles with uncertainty. Let me correct that and say that's how Joe Horn in his tiny, finite little pinheadedness has felt at times. But then and we've talked, you and I say, but then objectively, when I stand back, God was always right ahead of us. So it's me who's down there going, oh my gosh, where's the boat going? There's a storm. And then you sit back and make it through the storm. It's like, well, the seawaters weren't really that wavy. You're just misreading the room, because you need to have more faith that the Father is going to take care of this. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
And again, brother, I don't talk about this ever. So I don't know if this is interesting at all. But I will say, could it be that genuine ministry is almost always throttled to a place where it's dependent on God? He's going to supply what you need and a little bit more than that, so that you can maybe grow. But the minute it stops being about growth for his kingdom, he withdraws, and then anything you were pursuing that started to replace that is now just some carnal endeavor having to do with personal prosperity or generational wealth or power or the things that, people. I want to say, and I believe I watched this in my father. Money and opportunity never changed my father. He never stopped being a home mission, salt of the earth pastor.
It's a good man.
He absolutely, and he had lots of opportunity. But I will say, and I can't be specific, but I will say what he did with his opportunities financially is he would roll it right back into ministry. Now, if I can live up to his model, and I believe that for me, it won't be a difficult challenge because I based on what I've had access to in terms of opportunity,
Yeah.
it hasn't changed me. I don't believe it's changed me. I'm so concerned about my health and the health of my family. I'm so preoccupied with not taking for granted that the truest blessings are the health of your children. Like my brain doesn't get fixated on things like money or power.
Amen.
And as far as being seduced by power, you know me, man. I'm like what I said a minute ago, would be totally reclusive and live under a cave, except that I feel like I have this responsibility to steward over ministries that I'm responsible for now. And I care very much about what those ministries do. The part of it that I take the most joy in is the Whispering Ponies Ranch rehabilitation that we offer children. So if I can just live up to my dad's model, I'll be buried someday if the Lord tarries. And I'm hoping that those that survive me will say money and opportunity never changed him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. And just to be clear for anybody that's listening to this, if you're wealthy and you have a lot of money, we're not trying to say that you're hellbound or anything like that, because
that's a good point.
There are examples of people, the most, some of the people that were the closest to God. Abraham was wealthy. David was wealthy. Solomon was wealthy. These guys were very, very wealthy. But, with wealth comes the opportunity for corruption, and the enemy's going to work you, because if he can get you bent the other direction and take those resources and have them directed in not so good ways, he's going to do it. One of the failure points for Solomon at the end of his life was he got in a relationship. She started convincing him to start doing idol worship and take all those resources and put him in the wrong direction, right? But, even Jesus told us, truly I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And that's in Matthew 19:23 and 24. And ultimately what Christ is saying there is, it's not, if you're rich, you're not going to make it. It's just be prepared and make sure your heart is set in the right place. Like it sounds like your father very much was, because of the temptation and the things that are going to come at you that you're going to have to turn away from in order to stay on the right path.
No, I agree. And I'm glad that you offered that, because I probably should have said that and didn't think about it. No, I'm not disparaging anybody of means at all, especially people that have worked hard. I have personal companies. I would love for them to be enormously successful. What I believe I would do with that resource, though, is fret less about some of the difficulties that these non-for-profits are having at times and be able to underwrite them. And that was what I saw my dad do a lot. When 501c3 non-for-profits were struggling that he believed in, he would just help them. And so anyway, I will give you an example of this playing out this year. Skywatch TV was beginning to trend in a very positive direction. And it was brought to my attention that there would be a budget for expansion if we wanted to go that route. And we had one of two decisions. Do we move further into the black and away from DEFCON 5, or do we, in a step of faith, invest some of that money in a new network so that we can reach more homes? And after lots of prayer and talking with the board, we made the decision to sign a deal with the Word Network. And also my good buddy Kyle Millholland, who brought deeply theological encouragement when he said, Joe, no risk it, no biscuit. It's an inside joke, but it really was we were on the phone for 2 hours. And I was
Probably,
just
yeah.
sharing my heart with you, brother. And we,
Mhm.
you kind of, it was your opinion that if you have it, invested into more homes hearing your gospel messaging.
Absolutely.
And so now we're in, countries all around the world that we weren't in before, places that can't afford to support Skywatch TV, and they're hearing the weekly gospel message that we put on. So,
Amen.
and that to me is my model. Like, let's get Skywatch, let's get it into a place where it can function. But if there's anything above what we need to simply function, you reinvest in expanding to new networks. And that would be my hope. If the Lord were to give us years, if his return is not immediately, if I live, for the foreseeable, that would be my heart, is that Skywatch would continue to grow, expand, and that others would rise, brother, and join what Whispering Ponies Ranch is doing. Maybe get some surrogate ministries that want to champion similar models where they come out, and we would be happy to show them what we do, and people of means and resources doing the same types of things.
I would like to dive into a few more things around some of the other parts of your ministry, just to kind of go back to the ranch a second, because I know that's obviously a huge part of the ministry and a really important part of the ministry. What percentage of the children that you're getting, are they all 100% every summer? And I guess explain the time frames of the ranch, and what kind of kids do you have showing up at the ranch? Are they all coming from foster care?
So almost all of them are coming from the foster care system. We partner with ministries like Royal Family Kids,
Mm.
forthechildren.org, Teen Reach. And then we have a new legacy group with Alice Beckett that just started this last camping season. So these are kids that have been removed from homes where they've been abused in every inconceivable way. And now they are in foster care, and they are now available via these partnership ministries to attend, at no expense to them, by the way, Whispering Ponies Ranch for week-long rehabilitation, Christ-centered rehabilitation camping program. So I don't know if that made sense what I just said, but groups like Royal Family Kids, they're the ones that interface with the foster care systems and the parents, and they're the ones that aggregate the children. They bring them to us via the bus. And then when they arrive, we take over partnering with them. We take over the food service, the running of the amenities, and are a support infrastructure to them. They use Whispering Ponies Ranch facilities, overnight stay, zip lines, rock wall, indoor swimming pools. I myself personally pre-tape Skywatch TV episodes so that I can take the months of the summer to go and run the zip lines and do the cleaning of the swimming
Yeah.
pools, literally myself doing the rehabilitative work there. And so they are presented with crafts and activities and a chance to finger paint and build things that they get to take home. They get incredible food. We are very exquisite in our spread. We don't do this corporate camp food type food. When we do, as an option, it's because we have kids that are institutionalized that will only eat stuff that resembles cafeteria food or prepackaged, like cereals.
Yeah.
And so there is that option, but it's not mandatory. We always put fresh food out, big salads, clean meat options.
Yeah, they sounds like they're eating pretty good, and you're taking good care of them. And I know a lot of times, after having conversations with you, they often don't want to leave.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Everybody wears sunglasses on Friday to hide the fact that they're bawling their eyes out. This is my leadership. These are my family members. I, after a series of years, have gotten better at partitioning my brain off enough not to break down in front of the kids without having to wear sunglasses. But I will tell you that in 2023, my object state, my mask, broke at the zip line. We were doing ministry with a young little boy named Cody, and he was aging out of the program, and I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. And we had this exchange where I'm getting ready to zip him for what was the 4th year in a row. And you really get to where you know these kids. And I didn't know if I'd ever see him again. I managed to get through zipping him, but as soon as he left what we call the crow's nest, and he's out on the zip now, I then turn to my daughters and I'm weeping. And my daughters have not seen that. They have not seen me lose composure like that, and I'm weeping. What's wrong, Daddy? No, it's not. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm trying to hulk up because I've got another kid incoming. It's really hard on Fridays because you have a mix of kids that are hiding behind garbage cans. They don't want to leave Whispering Ponies Ranch. They've had the best time they've ever had in their life. Many of the kids that come to Whispering Ponies Ranch, Kyle, have never even been celebrated. They've never had a birthday party.
Aw.
The idea of eating a cake and getting a present is completely foreign to them. And so every camp, every year, every kid, at some point during that camp week, they're going to receive a personal pan-sized birthday cake. They're going to receive, gender complementary presents. For like little boys are going to get boy gifts like cars and remote control things and footballs and Nerf things. Little girls will get baby dolls and coloring books and makeup kits. And they're presented with these. They're all gift wrapped. They get to open them just like it's a birthday. These kids don't want to go home on Friday. They have a hard time wanting to leave. And we can't make promises like, well, we'll see you next year, because we don't know if they'll be placed elsewhere or if we'll ever see them again. A lot of the kids we do get to see for many years in a row. And by the way, if people are wondering, does that program work? What can you really do in the life of a kid in 1 week? Miracles. In the documentary series Rescue Us, which we produced and put out last December, it's a 6-part series. You can watch it on Amazon Prime or go find the DVD at Amazon. But Rescue Us, the 6-part series, features Samantha Orr. She was one of the worst recorded cases of abuse in Springfield, Missouri history when she finally got removed from her home. And she tells her testimony. It's absolutely, we put a lot in. There were things we couldn't even put in the series. It's just horrific. Just absolutely horrific. And again, you get into how could a monster do this, and you realize there were drivers. A lot of these people that are perpetrating abuse were abused. It's the only life they've ever known. It's a cycle. They themselves were victims, and I'm not making normal what they've done or making excuses for them. They themselves need to be put somewhere where they can't harm others. And many of them need their own decompression and rehabilitation.
And just to interrupt really quickly, that highlights exactly what I was I think we were talking about earlier, which is why this is so important for the enemy to get in here and target kids, because you can see this cycle.
That's right.
That is so hard to break. And it's almost like, the multi-generational special. I can break this one, and then we just continue this pattern over and over and over again. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, it is. It hurt people.
That's right.
That's it. Whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, the father that beats his son is likely to be raising the next generation of father that will beat son.
Yeah.
Because it's the only variation of survival they know. They create an object state. Their brain literally partitions the abuse off. It's called transference. They aren't rational in those moments. They're not like a child that was, raised in a nuclear family and nourished with good vitamins and told that they're of value and that they're loved. You can't sit across the table from somebody that thinks like that and not unpack how they got there with some understanding. I've had people confide in me as a child advocate. I'm a magnet for this stuff now, from people's admission of porn addiction, people that you've probably seen around, the admission of porn addiction. That's why I'm telling you, this is not an exclusive monopoly. The church thinks it's the world. This is something that is very prevalent in ministry and in positions of leadership and personalities that people know. But the other part of this is the physical abuse part of this. I've had people confide in me things, and I know you've told me to be uncensored. This is just, how far down the rabbit hole do you want me to go? I had a guy just about 5 months ago. He was a porn addict and thank God now he's completely reformed and he's written a book. I don't know if he would want me. I suppose he's written a book. I'm going to leave this confidential because I've not asked him if this part of it is public. But he tells me, he says, and by the way, his book is all about freedom from pornography. But he was, I want to say it was almost 30 years addicted. And the way it started, though, is he is 9 years old, and his neighbor, a full-grown adult man, rapes him. Now, he's 9 years old. He's been completely raped. He has no one to talk to. And I believe his father was emotionally completely unavailable and maybe also abusive. You can't look at a guy like that who has no self-worth at all. His innocence was completely shattered, and be overly angry that he then becomes a porn addict with no sense of direction. He doesn't know that he's buying into an industry that's creating the paid-for demand to have a child in a forced sexual encounter. He's a victim.
Yeah, he can't recognize the cycle that he's in.
Oh, he has no idea.
Yeah.
People like that cannot be held at all responsible, in my view, for where they're stuck. Especially if the church has never taken the time to outreach or love or provide an olive branch or those initial steps to admitting that you have a problem. A lot of these people are just in the secular enterprise of planet Earth. They have no clue who God is, or most of their view of the church is cynical, right? But that doesn't mean they don't have the shame cycles or the bouts with depression or the want to end their life or the lost sense of pointlessness and not being subservient to a creator. So, we've seen all of it, man, at Whispering Ponies Ranch, from the reformed adult to the child that is still stuck there. We've had kids show up at Whispering Ponies Ranch, and it's where they finally felt safe enough to say, yes, even the home they placed me in, the abuse has continued. And now Child Services is at our facility intervening for a child. We've also seen children, falsely accused because they've learned that they can weaponize pointing fingers and say that guy or that woman did this thing. And so we have policies like 2 Deep. No child goes with any adult alone, ever. Ever. No exceptions, no excuses.
Yep.
A zero threshold, zero tolerance policy. And we are ardent defenders of that policy. And we expect every group to come in to adhere to that policy. And so groups like Royal Family Kids, they have their own policies, 2 Deep. And a lot of times you'll see 3 adults. 3 adults in case one of the children starts running off into the woods or locking themselves in a bathroom stall. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we've got all these policies. We've seen it all, brother, but let me just focus for a second on something positive to maybe leave the viewers with. We have seen God, like Samantha Orr, the woman that I just mentioned. To this day, she was one of the most abused cases in Springfield, Missouri history. Started off at a Royal Family Kids camp years and years and years ago at a different facility and came to know Jesus. And now today as an adult, she's been reformed. She is one of the leading vocal child advocates that partners with ministries like Royal Family Kids. She's one of their national spokespeople. She's a part of the Rescue Us series. She does seminars and speaks at conferences.
What a powerful advocate.
Powerful advocate.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing, as Whispering Ponies Ranch has been in ministry for the last 6-7 years, now we're seeing kids that started as young children aging up out of the program and coming back, Kyle, as young adult counselors.
Yeah.
Who have said, Satan had a plan for my life and it was going to be of bitterness and hatred.
Yep.
And then eventually suicide. But instead, God has rehabilitated me. He has given me a new lease on life. And I am here to pay that forward. I am here to be that voice of hope for someone else that's stuck where I once was. If somebody wants to help, I'll give you the short version. Algorithms feed national conversations. And right now, if you pre-order this book, Innocence Shattered, you help drive everything we've been talking about for the last couple of hours into mainstream narrative. You're feeding the algorithms that do the opposite of what we're talking about. You can help me raise this to a national conversation. You can help open doors for more interviews, more national attention by pre-ordering a copy of this book at Amazon.com. And I apologize. I know I'm losing my voice. I've been doing interviews basically every day, Kyle, and lots of them long ones.
Yeah, and I know, and I've held you longer than what we originally intended today. But
it's okay.
and you're doing all this because it's you obviously shared very clearly earlier that how much this means to you and how much God has stirred in your heart. And now, he was stirring in your heart before you really got and put your hands in and started to get in there and actually do work and see the reality. And once you started to see the reality of everything, face to face,
That's right.
I can only imagine the conviction level had to go up 50,000 times. But yeah, I think much to your point, you know, to kind of put the positive on this that we talked about at the very beginning, so it's not, so doom and gloom and there's just no hope. What are some things that people who are listening to this can do in order to make a difference?
That's a great question. First of all, prayer is massive. And I don't mean drive-by prayers. And what I mean by drive-by prayers is I made this up, but I call it the Cindy Lou has cancer syndrome. So forgive me if somebody out there is actually watching this by the name of Cindy Lou, but I call it Cindy Lou has cancer syndrome. So Cindy Lou goes to church and she reveals a prognosis that doesn't look very good. And what happens? Immediately, people are hysterical. Their emotions are at a level 11. They instantly begin volunteering to make spaghetti for Cindy Lou's family. Where can I drive you? What can I do? What do you need? 2 months later, Cindy Lou's family member is posting that she's not doing well on Facebook. And the same people willing to drop everything and do everything to help Cindy Lou are like, that's a bummer. Man, oh man. Well, what's for dinner? When people don't think that they can affect outcomes, and also their attention spans are very limited by the fact that everybody's got a lot of stuff going on. Most people are very busy and they've got their own problems, their own lives. It's really hard to hold them at an 11 into perpetuity, right? So what I mean by, Cindy Lou has cancer syndrome is that very fast, rapid decline in interest or subject fatigue. It is also applicable here. This conversation today may have really stirred somebody. They're with us. They've been waiting with bated breath. They're still in the chat room. They're still watching online, wherever they're watching, and we've got them. But in the subsequent days following this, eventually they'll go back to driving forklift or eating sandwiches or working wherever it is they work. You can't hold people at an 11. And so what I mean by that is you have to become very intentional with your prayers. Say, Lord, I may not feel this gripped by this in 2 weeks, but I refuse to become comfortable ever again. I've been informed, I've been enlightened, and now I know that there are children in dog cages. I know that they're coming up missing every day from the foster care system. The brightest minds in the country, Kyle, aggregating the number of missing children just from the foster care system alone, not even the vast surplus of kids being raised in homes that aren't, that have nothing to do with foster care. Place it at about 11 to 12 kids coming up missing per day with no chain of custody and no whereabouts, nobody looking for them. And they're going to be classified as runaway. But that may not be true at all. They may be forced into prostitution, victims of the sex trade industry. But there's not enough law enforcement. There's not enough help. There's not enough volunteers. When you hear stuff like that, that needs to serve as a reminder that you may be comfortable in your life and it's time to get back to forklift or wherever you were. But for somebody out there right now, they are still entrapped and they are looking for the body of Christ to do something about this. That's what I mean by focused, intentional prayer. You say, God, I'm going to give space to this every week. I'm going to take this before my church, and I refuse, regardless of how busy or distracted I become, to commit this to prayer, because while I might be okay today, some kid is in a dog cage. I keep going back to the same need for prayers that are focused, because there are children right now, Kyle, as we've done this interview, every 10 seconds, there's been a report in the United States of child abuse. Somebody somewhere is making phone calls. Somebody's finding officers. Somebody's ringing hotlines every 10 seconds to report abuse. And if you wait 2 more seconds, it will have happened again since the moment I started telling you that every 10 seconds that happens. It is not responsible for us as the self-proclaimed body of Christ to turn a blind eye to this one. I don't care if you serve your church as a janitor. I don't care if you work outside doing, outdoor theatrical lighting. I don't care what your role is. I feel like this is one that is everyone's responsibility. I'm not telling you to leave your current job. I'm not telling you to leave your current vocation. I'm telling you that you can at least pray for these kids. The other thing I would offer, there is an appendix at the back of this book. It's very thorough, and it's designed to put together a series of thought exercises that guide you through what is complex and distill it down to very simple, yes, God, I will give you my yeses. And you don't have to have Whispering Ponies Ranch in your backyard or parents that came along and founded an anti-trafficking ministry for you to be of value to the kingdom.
Amen.
You can get involved locally in your local church, doing outreaches that help try to identify what the signs and symptoms of abuse in your own backyard looks like. You can start asking conversations with kids. Hey, how are you feeling? Are you getting enough to eat this week? Kids will tell you the craziest things. No, I'm not eating most days. And they look completely normal. You have no idea. Programs that are focused on getting to the bottom of whether you in your own church have kids that are being victimized by their porn addict uncle who is enacting these things out, in very responsible ways. That's why I suggest you start with a book like Innocence Shattered. It's a series of thought exercises that will help you navigate giving God your yes in a very responsible way. Law enforcement, whether you're involved in local politics, whether you're one that would like to write a letter to your congressman to demand more anti-trafficking or anti-abortion laws. But we could spend all day talking about the differing ways that people can get started. The free one, the one that you can start today without the book, is the prayer, but very focused prayer. Not drive-by, not anecdotal, not spur of the moment, and then it falls apart in the subsequent number of days that follow this podcast. Focused, perpetual, committed prayer.
Amen.
And I feel like prayer, but do. Pray, but also do what you can. What does that look like in your own church? Explore that with your pastor. Can you? You can't be guilty of profying parents. I'm not talking about start spying programs at your church and then get arrested for stepping over HIPAA law. I'm talking about talking to children and learning where they live and how they're doing. What is that mark on your arm? Oh, that's a skateboard injury. Okay. Does he show up every week with the same skateboard injury? That might be time to call law enforcement. Say, I'm very suspicious that abuse might be happening with little Sally. She's very strange in that she won't eat. When the food is presented every week, she won't eat. Or she wants to take food home in her pockets. Every week wants to take food home in her pockets. See, a lot of church people just take those little tells for granted.
Yeah.
To me, as a child advocate, those are tells that something at the house may not be right.
Screaming something's wrong.
Screaming. Yeah, public school officials. Are the kids taking food home? Are they showing up with pedicures and manicures that they themselves don't have the money for? Might be being visited by a sugar daddy that is grooming them in social media to eventually abduct for forced prostitution. And that's how it looks. That's how it starts. Parents are not paying attention to this. Where did she get the money? It's a good time for parents to be involved and investigate. So there's lots of ways, and you can do your own research. What are the signs and symptoms of being groomed? What are the signs and symptoms of abuse? And what can I, as an interventionist, as an advocate, do without overstepping privacy laws or creating difficulty or unfairness to families that are simply living life normally and there's nothing there?
Sure, right.
We don't want to turn everybody paranoid about everyone and turn neighbor against neighbor, but there's a responsible way to just keep your eyes open and intervene for children. Some of the kids that have been pulled out of trafficking started by finally confiding in a neighbor or somebody at their church or to a police officer that something was going on. Does that make sense? And by the way, one last thing, Kyle.
Yeah.
People think that trafficking is all, four guys in dark clothing pull up in a white van in the middle of the night and grab you and pull you into some other country where now you're being forced to do things. A lot of this is happening inside of homes where the kids are never removed from their homes. You can do your own research on this. An enormous number of children that are forced into sex slavery, a form of trafficking and forced prostitution, end up there because of their foster parents or their biological guardians. These people have meth deals that get sideways. They themselves are abusing the child, so they use the child as a form of entertainment with people they're afraid of to square a debt. So when you think of trafficking, it's not just the van pulls up, you never see.
Yeah, right.
This is family members allowing and trying to normalize it so that the child doesn't even know that they're being abused. They're trained when the neighbor comes over, this is what it looks like as a form of entertainment, or this is love. I talk about this all over the country. You've heard me talk about this, Kyle. Normalizing abuse or pedophilia so that it is a form of love. The child protests less, tattletales less, thinks of it as love or as normal.
Before the next part of our discussion, if you guys are enjoying this show, check the description to get your copy of the book, Innocence Shattered, and support Joe today. Also, if you want to help support me, I would really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, follow, and share if you feel I'm deserving of it and you listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever that is. Please make sure that you leave me a 5-star review. Also, if you'd like to be part of a healthy, supportive, non-algorithmically controlled community of believers, I'd love for you to join my school community. Check the description for the link to join today. There's so much of this, and I recently just shared a lesson at church, and I pulled some statistics myself from the Pew Research Center, which is another very large think tank that collects data.
Absolutely.
And what it did is it showed another side of the church that is in decay with the acceptance of a lot of, unscriptural and unbiblical and satanic things that we've allowed into society, such as LGBTQ and, transgenderism, and we're getting into transhumanism. And you can see there were 3 different studies done, one 2007, 14, and here recently, I think in 23 or 24. And you can see the trend line, and every single category was nothing but up with allowing these things into the church and normalizing them and making them okay, and not only in society, but in the church. And the thing that I shared that probably was the most shocking to the crowd were things, and you can see this, you can see the beginning markings of what you just said with normalizing pedophilia and bestiality. These things are on the upward trend. And we're starting to, the first thing that happens is we start to soften language. So instead of saying pedophilia, because that has such a bad connotation, now we start to say, minor attracted person. Right. Well, I'm just a minor attracted person. And they're lobbying to be added on to the LGBTQ plus, camp. And so you can see these things. And if we do not start to take a stand as a body of Christ and in the church, it is going to become our normal. It's sad.
I agree with you completely. And without getting into all 6 hours, that is what a lot of the Rescue Us series focuses on. It would actually talk about and really unpack that path, how that's being normalized in the classroom, and how that is absolutely what they're pushing to legalize. They hate the fact that right now adults can't have relationships with children, inappropriate ones. And it's something there's a whole agenda behind it. I want to believe right now we're seeing a pushback that has probably collapsed some of those efforts that were really gaining traffic. They've really derailed some of that momentum for a spell.
I think so too. I'm hoping so.
And I'm hoping rather than just a setback, it's a permanent collapsing of those movements. But we know that the hearts of men are wicked.
Yep.
And, Israel forgot the Lord their God, and there was, war and famine and pestilence. And then Israel remembered the Lord their God and celebrated him, and there was surplus and jubilee and triumph. And then Israel forgot the Lord. Again, here goes the cycle. And I feel like America is an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And what it will become before the Lord's return is up to, I think, the human experiment called America. And if we keep our hearts in alignment with God, we don't have issues like abortion or children wondering what gender they are. If we keep our beliefs in alignment with whatever our daydreams can titillate and construct, we're in serious trouble.
Amen.
Urgent decline, total catastrophe. So we will see. Is this a moment, Kyle, where America is going to turn from its evil ways and rededicate their lives to God? Is he going to heal their land? Well, he promises us to do that, but it has to be sincere repentance.
Amen.
It can't be like these pastors that are indulging in pornography over the course of a decade, progressively becoming monsters, where they pay lip service to the ministry and privately, perpetually cry out to God and say that they're sorry, but their actions don't back that up. What did Jesus say to the woman at the well?
Go and sin no
Go
more.
and sin no more. He didn't say go and try really hard.
That's right.
And then, but if you do, just keep kind of crawling back. And I think we have a biblical example in Ephraim where the Holy Spirit just withdraws. He can see that you are pushing him out of he gives you free will. So God is more interested in your actions and where your heart is than the words you say. I believe when you say, Lord, I'm so sorry, and blah, blah, blah. After a while, it's just hot steam. Those are Joe Horn's words. It's hot steam.
Yeah, you're just checking a box to make yourself
You're
feel
checking
better.
a box to make sure you don't go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the same thing as saying, God, I'm a broken human.
Sincere repentance.
I never want to go back to what life was like during that shame cycle. I will never go back. I will not be a counterfeit husband. I will not be a counterfeit father. Find your list of absolutions, the things that you absolutely must have, more important than this fleeting titillation. To me, that's repentance. And I think when you're looking at whether the nation is restored or not, it's going to be more than just, Lord, we realize that we almost lost our way. Please heal our land. And I'm not going to try to say that I understand all of the mind of God, but I'm saying if you put it on me, my encapsulation would sound something like this. Well, are you repentant? Are you going now to turn from your wicked ways?
Yep.
Or are you crying out because you're desperate, because you see you're about to lose your comfort little pillowcase you sit on and play video games, and the comfort of your drive-by pizza and your instant access to TV? Is that what you're worried about? Because I care about your heart, not your comfort. I will restore your land, but you're going to turn from your wicked ways. So I'm watching and I'm appraising. Nope, still wicked ways. No restoration.
That's right.
I don't know if you agree. And Kyle, for as long as I would sit here, you and I could go on for 6 more hours.
Amen.
At some point, how many of your listeners want to hear Joe Horn talk anymore, right?
Well, I think we've definitely extrapolated a lot today, and there's a lot to think about. But I want to kind of take a moment here, because one of the perks of being a member of the show is actually to highlight questions from the members.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm going to do that right now and highlight one. And the first thing that I'm going to do is highlight a couple comments from this person, which is from Melissa. She says, "Thank you, Joe, for your devotion and your time today. A very moving conversation." So she also said this earlier, which was very complimentary of what your work is. She said, "Kids are so easily malleable. Their souls are wanting for love and acceptance so deeply, they'll accept anything for a breadcrumb. I'm so grateful Joe has this community to feed these children's hearts and bellies," was the continuation there that you may not be able to see. And then she did ask a question earlier, and I'll throw it out here really quick, which I think is a good one. And we kind of touched upon some of this, but I just want to make sure we thoroughly touch upon this from the aspect of being useful and what we can do to help fight this. So she said, "How can kids connect with you? I'm familiar with Teen Challenge, but I think they're only specific to a few states. Is there anything listeners can take away to spread this message to their own community?"
Well, first of all, Melissa, thank you for your kind remarks and your comprehension of children and their needs and the ways that can translate into abuse, because they're looking for affirmation and love. You use the analogy of breadcrumb. That's exactly right. And that is why these malevolent actors that are exploiting systems like foster care have figured out how easy these damaged kids, traffickers that are grooming these kids because they have a number of attributes that they're looking for. These traffickers are looking for kids that have a history of running away, so nobody looks for them when they're gone. They're looking for kids that have mental problems, that need affirmation. that are easy to manipulate and damage. And so you seem like, without even having a conversation with you, you've already gotten the grasp on this. And then I also want to react to your comment about Teen Challenge. So Teen Challenge, God used in my life, I think, was a seed that he planted in my heart when I was about 9 years old. My father was pastor of a big church in Portland, Oregon, and we saw Teen Challenge come through. And I remember these men running around, and I thought it was so funny that they all had matching T-shirts, but they're not a choir. And I didn't get what this thing is. They're not a choir. They're not an act. They're not a dance routine. Like, what is this? Big men, all diverse, some Chinese, some, Hispanic, and they're big, small, random men. This is not a cast for something. And I remember my dad trying to explain what Teen Challenge is. He said it's a lot of them are ex-cons. A lot of them come off the streets. They were drug addicts. They were this, they were that. Teen Challenge is giving them a shot at food in their belly in exchange for rehabilitation. They have to agree and consent to go through a program of rehabilitation. And even as a kid, I just thought, man, that is so cool. So I remember being in the foyer of my dad's church and seeing these men selling these red and blue T-shirts. And I think they gave me one because I was the pastor's kid. But I remember having some pleasant conversation with this very tall, large African-American man. And I was a huge fan of wrestling as a kid. I know this is totally dithering. I was like, what is this? This is not what I asked at all. But he was huge and he had big muscles. And I remember thinking that this guy looked like a WWF wrestler. And our conversation was not very long, but I'm like 9 years old. And I just remember being struck by how sweet he was and how humble he was. This massive Goliath of a man could be very imposing and very frightening. And I remember thinking, was he one of the ones in jail? Was he one of the guys on the streets? I don't know, I better be nice, but he was so kind. And so all the years of my life, way before I became a child advocate, my wife and I have supported the women in Springfield, the local Teen Challenge. So I have many, many years. I was friends for years in Portland with the president of the chapter in Portland, Oregon of Teen Challenge. Many, many years. Friends with people in that ministry, and I love what they've done. They are often underfunded and understaffed.
Yeah, very much so.
But to your question, what can people do? And not to continuously, shamelessly plug my book and say, much of the answer to that is in the appendix at the end of Innocence Shattered, a series of thought exercises to guide towards. So let me give you this. This is very tangible, and you don't need my book to do this. If somebody listening to this program today, the whole concept of being charitable, I guess, Teen Challenge, the idea that you would outreach to the downtrodden, the example in Matthew of what the gospel looks like, it's ministering to the orphans and the widows. That whole concept got in my heart at a very young age. If somebody watching this program, I don't want to buy the book, I don't have the money, no time, it's going to be too dark, I don't want to deal with it. But I did resonate with a part of this that had to do with Joe's compel to go and now be an activist or an interventionist or an advocate for children. Go to royalfamilykids.com. They have chapters all over the United States. I don't quote me, but I believe it's like 222. It's a lot of chapters. I don't care what state you're in. There is something in proxy to you. They have a program of going through a background check and training required to be a volunteer, but they need volunteers to come with them for 1 week rehab camps for these very special kids that have been abused in every possible way. And let me tell you something, if a week doesn't sound like a lot, the emotional toll of being at such a high level of output for an entire week is a marathon. It's very difficult. But again, the rewards, I'm telling you, if you volunteer at one of these camps and you become a counselor to work with a group like forthechildren.org, Teen Reach, I believe .com, or royalfamilykids.com. Teen Reach is the program that takes over when the kids age out of Royal Family Kids. They age out at 12, then they go to Teen Reach. But they need volunteers to be counselors for these week-long camps. I had a guy tell me, his name is Will Johnson. He's one of my favorite coordinators for the Royal Family Kids. We've been doing ministry for 6 or 7 years, the entire time we've run at Whispering Ponies Ranch. He told me last year, he said, the emotional toll on a counselor after they've been through, the night terrors with kids that are wetting the bed and screaming at 1 a.m., the ones that are wanting to run off in the woods or become violent with themselves, the difficulty of being a counselor for those programs for an entire week is such an emotional toll that it takes about 6 months after a 1-week camp for most adults to recover enough emotionally to recommit to do it again the next year. He told me that. He said it's about 6 months before people start signing up to do it again. Because of
emotional toll.
You're hearing confessions. Yeah. You're looking into the eyes of a kid that's telling you what has happened in home. And then a lot of it is filled with joy. You're also, it's an emotional roller coaster. Then suddenly a little boy or a little girl gives their life to the Lord, or writes down all of their shame cycles and plants it into the ground at the tree planting ceremony because they want to be able to forgive their biological parent or their abuser. You see children that are shut down that won't even talk on Monday leave a total chatterbox on Friday, completely transformed, a brand new identity.
It's amazing.
It is a miracle. So one of the things that you'll never be able to undo, though, is be a counselor. This would be my challenge to anybody that's like, okay, where do I start today? Go to oilfamilykids.com, look at a chapter near you, and email them about going through their training and their background check to be a counselor. Because you will never be the same human being ever again.
Amen. Thanks, man. Melissa, thanks so much for your question and your comments. Really appreciate it. And thank you, brother, for being here today.
Yeah.
I love you, man. I love your heart. You're just a great dude. And the work you're doing is heavy lift, but man, how talk about rewarding to the spirit and the soul. So I just appreciate you and your giving me your time today, because I know it's precious. You have precious time to spend here today. That's comes at a cost of other things. So I understand that, and I know your situation. So I really, really appreciate you, man.
I know your situation, and if it means anything to anybody, I know Kyle Millholland. He's one of the good guys, and I know everybody in media. I know all of them. I know all of the TV shows, and I know all of the publishers. I know all of the people cranking out books and promoting them, and the publicists. I know everyone, all of them. What I won't say is anything to disparage someone else, but I will tell you that Kyle is one of the very few cranking out what I think is a calling on digital video every week. For him, this is what he's been commissioned to do. I expect his platform to continuously grow. And if you want to support something meaningful, support Word at War. It will grow, Kyle. You've got a great start. You're a fabulous editor and producer. And someday if I can poach you and get you to come work for me, I'll do it. Right now, God's got you doing that. But seriously, you're the real deal, man.
I appreciate that, man. It means a lot. Well, thank you guys so much for listening today, and bid you adieu. Until the next time on the Word at War.